Hello and welcome to World of Warships with Sorvesteon. At first I was going to do a video just about the Ishizuchi, and while it's a great ship, there just isn't that much to say about it to fill up a whole video. And with the Project R Tier 4 battleship contest going on, I decided to go buy all the Tier 4 battleships and do a cross comparison on all of them. All the ships in this video are fully upgraded, and there is no Arkansas beta, as the only way to get one was to have participated in the closed beta back in 2015, so I didn't really see any point in including such a rare ship. The first ship we're going to look at is the Wyoming. It's a very good ship. It's balanced and well-rounded. It doesn't lack or particularly stand out as the best in any area. It's also very easy to play. What I really want to emphasize with this clip I've sped up is just how durable the Wyoming is. If you want, you can pretty much broadside away like most newbies will with a moderate regard for incoming fire, because this ship can really take a beating. It's got the lowest HP out of all the other Tier 4 battleships, but she's got really good armor, and if you angle the ship, you can last for quite a while. I just sank a St. Louis, and now I'm going head to head with a New York, which is the American Tier 5 battleship. In this situation, I basically went 5-on-1 against 3 other battleships, 2 of which were Tier 5, and 2 cruisers, and I still managed to take out a cruiser and a battleship before I got sunk. Yes, I was hoping I would last long enough to ram that Congo, but alas, it wasn't to be. When we compare its guns to the other Tier 4 battleships, you can see it has 12 very average 305mm guns, and somewhat horrible shells. So like I said before, even though it has 12 guns, they don't really stand out. But that's not to say that she can't do awesome damage. As you can see against this Kawachi, the Wyoming can really dish it out. And keep dishing it out.
Enemy severely damaged.
And keep dishing it out. But as with all Tier 4 battleships, the dispersion is terrible, so your DPM is entirely up to chance. And one problem the Wyoming has is that you basically need to expose the full side of your ship to fire a full broadside. As you can see here, the angle of rotation for the second forward turret is limited by the superstructure, and the third turret just behind the superstructure has the same problem. Not to mention, the Wyoming's turrets have one of the slowest rotation speeds of any Tier 4 battleship. So when you have to shift sides in combat, be prepared to wait a very long time for your turrets to rotate over to the other side. However, the Wyoming has one big advantage over her other Tier 4 counterparts, and that's having her 12 guns spread across 6 turrets. Having the guns spread across more turrets than the other Tier 4 battleships gives you more control over her firepower. Like in this situation, where I'm trying to hit this St. Louis. Now, RNG wasn't being that kind to me, but my shells are landing pretty close because I'm able to adjust my aim for each pair of guns I fire. One other thing you should be aware of with the Wyoming is that compared to her other Tier 4 counterparts, she is noticeably lacking in secondary armament after you upgrade to her second hull. Where most other Tier 4 battleships get around 20 to 22 secondary guns, the Wyoming only gets 6. Now, these 6 127mm guns do fire more rounds per minute than most of the secondary guns on the other battleships, but it doesn't make up for the sheer number of secondary guns they have. Now, for a Tier 4 battleship, the Wyoming's AA is pretty good, and she might even be able to knock a plane or 2 down if you get lucky. You can see in this clip, my team's carrier flies his torpedo bombers over me because they're being chased by the enemy carrier's fighters, and I am able to knock one of them down. Now, this isn't no Iowa, so don't expect the Wyoming's AA to murder all incoming torpedo bombers. But it does at least provide some protection, and will deter enemy carriers from focusing you down when there are other, easier targets to go after. As for maneuverability, the Wyoming is very slow, and that 20.5 knots will definitely make you feel like the turtle on your team, especially compared to the Japanese battleships. But the Wyoming has the smallest turning radius and the second fastest rudder shift time, making her very maneuverable for a Tier 4 battleship. I mean, look at this thing turn. With this kind of turning ability, dodging incoming torpedoes is way easier than in other Tier 4 battleships. Lastly, the Wyoming has pretty good concealment. Its maximum firing range is about the same as its surface detectability range, but it's by far the stealthiest Tier 4 battleship when it comes to being spotted by planes. So what's my final verdict? The Wyoming is definitely a brawler. The next ship we're going to look at is the Russian Tier 4 battleship, the Imperator Nikolai I. This ship is very similar to the Wyoming, except that it's less newbie friendly to play and trades some defense for more flexibility. The thing that really sets the Imperator Nikolai apart from the other Tier 4 battleships is the configuration of her guns and the arrangement of her turrets. She has a bit more HP and slightly inferior armor to the Wyoming, but overall she's just as tough. A key technique to making the most of the Imperator Nikolai's traits is to really angle the ship to incoming enemy fire while your guns are reloading, and then angle wider again to fire again. Unlike the Wyoming, there is very little superstructure to obstruct your angle of fire, so there is no reason to present a flat broadside to the enemy in this ship. As you can see, by angling the ship forwards, towards the two enemy battleships, I was able to avoid taking any big hits. Like the Wyoming, the Imperator Nikolai has 12 guns, but with better shells than the Wyoming, and a much higher chance of setting fires with HE. However, the Imperator Nikolai also has the slowest reload of all the Tier 4 battleships, at 35 seconds. So her reduced rate of fire balances out her better shells and makes her firepower about the same as the Wyoming's. 3 of the 4 turrets are kept forward-facing and can rotate forwards freely, allowing the Imperator Nikolai to change forward firing angles quickly and still retain use of 9 of her 12 guns. So even though the Imperator Nikolai's turrets rotate slower than those on the Wyoming, they usually don't have to rotate as far. And as I mentioned before, the Imperator Nikolai has much less superstructure than other Tier 4 battleships, which allows you a lot of flexibility in angling the ship while firing your guns. However, unlike other Tier 4 battleships, she has 3 guns per turret, so the firing angle flexibility is offset by the minimum number of guns that are fired each time the player clicks the left mouse button. So the Imperator Nikolai is a bit less forgiving of bad aim than the Wyoming is. Do you remember how I said the Imperator Nikolai traded some defense for more flexibility? Well, AA defense is the big thing it traded. The AA on the Imperator Nikolai is absolutely useless. It has all of 6 very inadequate AA guns, making the ship very vulnerable to air attacks. And trust me, every enemy carrier will let you know just how much your AA sucks. Like you can see happening to me in this clip. I just got focused by both enemy carriers, and it was really annoying. The Imperator Nikolai can't turn as well as the Wyoming, but it's still agile enough that, like what I'm doing here, you can still dodge most torpedoes. The Imperator Nikolai has one of the slowest rudder shift times of all the Tier 4 battleships, so she's not that responsive. But her turning circle radius is second only to that of the Wyoming, so once she does get into a turn, she can really change direction pretty fast. Another thing to note is that she really slows down when she turns, to almost 15 knots in a hard turn, so every time you need to avoid torpedoes like this, you're going to lose a lot of speed. To make up for this horrible AA defense, one of the advantages that the Imperator Nikolai has over the other Tier 4 battleships is her low profile. She's not quite as stealthy from the air as the Wyoming, but on the surface, she is much better at sneaking up into a more comfortable firing range than the Wyoming is. Who knew battleships could be sneaky, right? I thought that's what destroyers were for. So, what's my verdict for this ship? I consider her to be the best surface-oriented brawler out of all the Tier 4 battleships. Now, when it comes to the Japanese Tier 4 battleships, a lot of people get the wrong idea about them, because they don't read the fine print. It's true that in the tech tree, the Myogi and the Ishizuchi are classified as battleships, which is a bit misleading because they are not true battleships, despite their placement in the tech tree. What you will find out if you read each of their descriptions is that they are in fact battle cruisers. And that means they were never designed to go toe-to-toe with other battleships like the Wyoming and the Imperator Nikolai. Instead, the Myogi and the Ishizuchi are basically supercruisers, and they were really made to dominate other cruisers. You can think of the difference between battleships and battlecruisers as being similar to the difference between heavy cruisers and light cruisers. Light cruisers can take out heavy cruisers, but heavy cruisers certainly have the advantage. Instead, light cruisers are more suited to taking on other light cruisers and destroyers. The other thing you need to understand is the Japanese philosophy behind battlecruiser and battleship design of the era, which, when it came to guns, was basically go big or go home, which is what we see on the Nagato, Amagi, and Izumo, which have 410mm guns, and on the Yamato, which has 460mm guns. All these Japanese battleships going from Tier 7 up to Tier 10 sport the largest caliber guns in the game, whereas the American guns never get bigger than 406mm. This explains why the Myogi and Ishizuchi are sporting guns way bigger than they actually need to kill other cruisers. Instead of loading them up with a lot more cruiser-sized guns, the Japanese went the route of slapping on bigger battleship-sized guns to completely overpower their target's armor. However, these bigger guns also give them the flexibility to engage battleships on more equal terms should they need to. So, a lot of people think the Myogi is inferior to all the other Tier 4 battleships because she only has 6 guns and relatively weak armor, but that is so not the case. Wargaming knew when they made the Myogi the Tier 4 battleship in the tech tree that she would need something to offset her weaker armor, because they knew people would use it to fight other battleships head-on. So they gave the Myogi more HP than the Wyoming and the Imperator Nikolai. Now, it is a fact that she only has 6 guns, but with an 18.6 kilometer maximum firing range that can be temporarily extended to 22.3 kilometers with the spotting aircraft consumable that is unique only to the Myogi at this tier, these guns have the best reach of all the Tier 4 battleships. What this means is that with the Myogi, you can start engaging targets long before other Tier 4 battleships have a chance to even get within sight of the enemy. So basically, your fight is going to start very soon after the battle starts, whereas other Tier 4 battleships will have to waste a good chunk of the battle just sailing to where the fight is, giving you a head start in racking up hits and potential kills. This long reach also gives you the option to provide long-range fire support for your allies on other parts of the map, without first having to spend a long time sailing into firing range like other Tier 4 battleships. Because, as you can see, the Myogi's massive range covers pretty much the whole map. Now, aside from her massive range, the Myogi is also the only Tier 4 battleship to get 356mm guns. And these guns are more accurate than those on her counterparts. But since she only has 6 of them, I found that I really tend to notice when my shells miss more than I do with the Wyoming or the Imperator Nikolai, because those ships simply get more hits by firing more shells per salvo, which makes up for their worse dispersion. However, the Myogi's larger caliber guns will guarantee that despite getting less hits, you will get about the same number of citadel penetrations as the other Tier 4 battleships. And the Myogi has one big advantage there, because the quality of her shells is so much better than those of the other Tier 4 battleships. So when she does score citadel penetrations, they will hurt a lot more, because her maximum AP shell damage is 10,000, whereas the other Tier 4 battleships only have maximum AP damage values between 8,000 and 8,600. As you can see, the Myogi's turrets are also relatively unobstructed by superstructure, giving them a very wide range of rotation, and allowing you to constantly keep the ship angled, and allowing you to turn in towards or away from the enemy relatively easily while your guns are reloading. Plus, her turrets have the quickest rotation speed of all the Tier 4 battleships, so overall, her lack of guns isn't really all that bad. Another great thing about the Myogi is, when she's fully upgraded, she has the best AA defense of all the Tier 4 battleships. This is something you will definitely appreciate if you get put into games with carriers, especially higher tier games with carriers. You can see in this clip that things aren't really looking too good for me. I got 4 incoming torpedo bomber squadrons and a dive bomber squadron too. And even though it was a little too late, I did take out 1 torpedo bomber. Now, the Myogi is the fastest and the most responsive Tier 4 battleship with the fastest rudder shift time. But she is a long ship, and her speed and her length makes her turning radius one of the largest, so she isn't that great at dodging incoming torpedoes. And having weaker armor makes her more susceptible to having her engines knocked out. Now you can see I ultimately got torped and bombed to death, but I did manage to shoot down 5 planes, which is a feat no other Tier 4 battleship except the Wyoming could accomplish. As I mentioned before, the Myogi is the fastest of all the Tier 4 battleships, so she has the mobility to stay relevant throughout the whole battle. One of the drawbacks with the Myogi, however, is her horrible concealment rating, which guarantees that she is almost always the first ship to be spotted, and makes her the focus of attention by other Myogis or other higher tier battleships. So, when all is said and done, my verdict for the Myogi is that she is a versatile cruiser hunter with sniper capability, and a ship you will never be bored in. As I said before, the Ishizuchi is a battlecruiser like the Myogi, and as a battlecruiser, her strengths revolve around hunting down enemy cruisers. This is really the only role she excels at, but excel at it she does. Unfortunately, she is at a significant disadvantage going toe-to-toe with dreadnoughts like the Wyoming and the Imperator Nikolai, which both have more armor and more guns. And the Myogi can use her range advantage to really soften up the Ishizuchi before the Ishizuchi can start returning fire. As far as HP and armor goes, the Ishizuchi is basically the same as the Myogi. However, unlike the Myogi, the Ishizuchi gets 10 guns of average caliber mounted across 5 turrets. Interestingly, the Ishizuchi has very good HE shells and a very good chance of setting fires with them, which is very reminiscent of Japanese cruisers to me. But in playing the Ishizuchi, I didn't really see this translate to great damage per minute, so I recommend sticking with her inferior AP shells for all but the squishiest of targets. More like the Wyoming and the Imperator Nikolai, the Ishizuchi is looking to improve her odds of scoring more citadel penetrations by showering her target with numerous AP shells. Individually, her AP shells don't do that much damage. Their maximum is only 8,000, which is the lowest out of all the Tier 4 battleships. So the Ishizuchi is hoping to get multiple citadel penetrations or cause a detonation. The accuracy of her guns is slightly better than those of the Wyoming and the Imperator Nikolai, so she has a slightly better chance of getting citadel penetrations than they do, which offsets her having less guns than them. In this first example, I took a wild shot between 2 islands at my maximum firing range, really not expecting to hit this Koenigsberg. I mean, even though the Ishizuchi's guns are slightly more accurate than the Wyoming's or the Imperator Nikolai's, they aren't really reliable enough to consistently hit citadels from this distance. Well, the RNG must have been being kind to me because I ended up scoring 3 citadel penetrations, one of which caused a detonation. Now this time, I was pretty much expecting to wreck this Kuma. I mean, at 6 kilometers, the shells don't have much time to disperse, so even in a Tier 4 battleship, your fire will be pretty accurate. Poor Kuma. Live and learn, right? The Ishizuchi also has the shortest maximum firing range of all the Tier 4 battleships. And as a battle cruiser, her maximum firing range is much more in line with Tier 4 cruisers than with Tier 4 battleships. But that's not too much of a problem because she has the speed to close the gap pretty quickly. One problem that the Ishizuchi does have that you can see here is that her middle turret is being obstructed by that lifeboat. You can tell because at the bottom of the screen, the loading bar for the middle turret is still yellow, while the others are green, indicating that the middle turret cannot fire at the desired point yet. So the Ishizuchi isn't able to fire all 10 of her guns forward at this sharp of an angle. In order to do that, the Ishizuchi either needs to go flat broadside to her target or be angled away from her target. But you can still stay angled towards your target while still having 8 guns available. The Ishizuchi's AA defense is slightly better than the Imperator Nikolai's AA defense, which is to say that she pretty much has nothing and will get wrecked by carriers pretty easily. Like in this clip, where I had just succeeded in capping Area B. You can hear the Ishizuchi's 6 little 76.2mm guns pew-pewing away, and not really doing much, while this carrier quite skillfully forced me to turn in one direction with its first set of torpedoes, and then lay down a second set that would be really hard to avoid. While not having much in the AA department, the Ishizuchi has mobility in spades, and is only slightly inferior to the Myogi in terms of speed and turning circle radius. And with her relatively high speed, you won't ever find yourself waiting too long to get back into the action. However, the Ishizuchi is very slow to respond, because she has the longest rudder shift time, which is something to keep in mind when playing her. This ship is not stealthy at all. She has the worst concealment out of all the Tier 4 battleships, both from the air and on the surface. So if you are planning on trying to sneak up on anybody with the ship, you might want to go grab an Imperator Nikolai instead. So my final verdict for this ship is that the Ishizuchi is a dedicated cruiser killer. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the different Tier 4 battleships in the game, their differences, their similarities, and I hope you subscribe to my channel for more videos like this about World of Warships. Until next time, take care and happy sailing!